So I have to ask, as a person, you as a person who loves literature, and one of, if not the greatest writer in video game history, Kurt, in the book, A Better Paradise, has this nice line that I think is thoughtful. At one point in college, I even wanted to be a writer. How ridiculous is that? A writer. Language models ended that fantasy for me and millions of others. So instead, I decided to get a master's in marketing and started to sell language models. So you, as a writer and creator of some of the most legendary narratives in recent history, how do you feel about LLMs being able to write in a way that looks awfully human?
I'm not that afraid of them for large-scale concepts. I don't think they're going to be very good at that. I think I think it's harder if, I began and I was too shy to tell anyone I want to be a writer. That's why I ended up in video games. And I would scribble away, like writing manuals and writing on like PS1 games, all 12 lines of dialogue in a game. Sometimes I wouldn't even get that job, and I'd just write the website copy. And then working on little bits and pieces, and then I'd luckily done enough work that when GTA 3 turned up, was the first thing that resembled real writing. I had all of these small bits of skills that I could assemble into it. Based on my fairly limited understanding of how language models work, they're not gonna replace good ideas. They can't really come up with good new ideas. What they can do is do low-level stuff. So I think it's going to be harder for people to start out in some of these spaces. If you're not very good concept artist, you're in a lot of trouble. If you have original ideas, I think you're fine. But I think I also think that they've done the sort of first 90% of the work to sound human. 95% possibly in some areas. The last 5% is going to end up being about 95% of the work. I think that last bit with tech, in my experience, with things like facial animation, has always been the last bits and pieces take far longer than the first bit. And so I'm probably a hideous Luddite, but I'm less scared than a lot of people. I think you're going to end up with a lot of work that looks the same. It's going to help people be creative in some ways. It's going to get some people who probably shouldn't be in that space out of that space. But if you've got talent, I think you'll be fine.
Yeah, I agree with you totally, actually. And it's hard to really put a finger on it. So one way to illustrate that, I speak English and Russian, and I've been reading Dostoevsky in both languages and using LLMs to translate back and forth, because I was preparing to have a conversation with the translators of Dostoevsky.
Which ones?
Richard Prevere and Larissa Volokhonsky.
Yeah, I read quite there when they first did Crime and Punishment.
Mm-hmm.
That was amazing.
They're wonderful translators, and a wonderful love story too. But in the translation process, you get to see the LLM is missing some magic, and they're, that couple of translators are world-class experts capturing the magic. And I can't quite put that into words, because you said like totally novel ideas, yes, but also this magic of the timing, the right word at the right time that captures the human experience. So they can do some really incredibly human-like, the 90%, like you mentioned, human-like phrasing about like the bulk of the storytelling, but the magic, whether it's, the endings of Red Dead Redemption 1 and 2, the timing of that, the word choice of that, everything around that. But it's hard to argue because they're incredibly impressive, winning all kinds of math competitions.
Yeah.
But what is that magic? And again, that could be just a romantic human side of me, just saying that LLMs won't be able to capture that, maybe desperately holding on for hope.
I don't think they're going to come up with magic. I think they're going to be fantastic at coming up with really cheap, decent stuff.